So today we're back on William. I have some good news. We've passed our pressure test on the boiler, so that's all good. So we need to fit a pressure gauge to this fitting here. So the normal method is to have a pipe coming round in a U-bend. So I'm thinking maybe come round here and then up vertical. So the point of the U-bend, which is called a siphon, is to you get a little bit of water collecting in there, and that protects the gauge against steam pressure once you've steamed it up once. So we need to do that. I will keep the pressure testing equipment attached because we'll need to check that the new pressure gauge is actually reading the correct amount. We've got a lovely selection of goodies from Macc Steam Models. They've sent me a couple of pressure gauges. I've got a whistle and a whistle valve. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the whistle yet. That might go on Asia or it might go on William. So perhaps leave a comment on your preferences. It could possibly go on either. Yeah, do let me know what you prefer. But excuse my voice today, I've got a sore throat and yeah, I sound a bit croaky. So I've had a quick rummage through my box of steam fittings. I'll just go through all the things we'll need for today. So this is the pressure gauge I've opted for. The working pressure is 80 psi. Now some people would go for a 120 pressure gauge so that you can keep it on while doing the boiler pressure test. But personally I'd rather. I've not had good luck with damaging gauges doing that, so I'd rather have a gauge that's a bit easier to read. So we're going with that. So that was from Macc Steam Models. I've got some 4mm pipe. So 4mm external diameter. It's a little bit chunky for this situation, but I have got some 1/4 fittings and the nipples that actually fit on those quite nicely. So, obviously that's going to be a bit chunky to actually go into the pressure gauge. So what I'm thinking actually on this end is to put the nipple on the inside. And I've got a little trick that will stop it getting blocked up. So as long as you can unscrew the threaded fitting, that should be okay. So I think if it goes in sort of like that, something like that, that would be perfect. So okay, I'll put you onto time lapse and we'll start fitting it. Okay, so it's not perfect, but it's usable. I think we've got this. This is quite nicely vertical. This section, we've got the U-bend that we need. It's a little bit messy round here. I didn't quite go quite as nicely. So the next job actually will be. I've left this end a bit long. I think I want the pressure gauge to be about here, so it's within the cab. So I'm going to have to chop a little bit off the upstanding part, but it's easier to do that once it's all bent, I think, than to try and get it exactly to size. So that's the pipe bent. I've not soldered this in yet, but you can see I've put the nipple on, so that's exactly where that's going to sit. So that's quite nicely done. I shall mark up this pipe where I want to cut it, and then we cut it in the vise. I've put 2 marks, and that's basically where I want this part to be. So some of this spigot will go inside that pipe, and to stop, because it's a very small hole, I should put the tiniest amount of jeweler's rouge inside that spigot to stop it getting blocked up. I'll show you that later when we come to do the silver soldering. But the next thing to do is to cut somewhere between those 2 lines. So we'll have a go at that next. Okay, so this is the setup we need for silver soldering. We want a very small ring of silver solder here, and a very small ring of silver solder here. Now we have to be very careful when we're silver soldering, because this will have to be in this position. So we don't want to silver solder that to the spigot, and we don't want to block the spigot up with silver solder either. So the way I do that is using jeweler's rouge. In the olden days we used to use Tipex, but you can't. The water-based Tipex doesn't really work very well. It was the old spirit-based stuff that was good. So now I use jeweler's rouge. It's very, very cheap. You know, it's like pennies for a bag this size, which is probably a lifetime supply. And all you do is you mix it up with a small amount of water, and it just turns to a paste like this. This is some I've used previously that's dried up, so I've just added some more water to it, and it just reconstitutes to a paste. And what you can see is when it dries, it produces this quite hard layer, and that prevents the silver solder from actually sticking to the metal. So it's very cheap. It's very easy to use. If you can use a paintbrush, you can use this stuff. So it's quite handy. So I'll get these all prepared, and then we can do some silver soldering. So conversely, we will need to use some flux just on the parts where we do want silver solder. So I tend to use, for this sort of thing, I use the Easy Flow flux from Johnson Matthey, which is fine for this kind of work. I tend to mix it up in a jam jar, and you can see that's dried up, so I can just add a little bit of water to that. It's a good idea when you're mixing up to have a bit of washing up liquid. It doesn't have to be tropical summer, it can be a different smell, that doesn't really affect much. But what that does is it just helps break down the surface tension when, say, the flux goes where you want it to. So I'll mix some of this up. I shall apply it very sparingly. I'm not sure if you can see what I'm using as a hearth here. These are thermalite blocks, which are a lightweight building block that we use in the UK. They are basically like a honeycomb structure, so they're very good insulator, and they do make a great insulator for silver soldering, but the surface does start to deteriorate after a while. You can see it's starting to break up, but as a cheap soldering hearth, really recommended. You know, sometimes you can pick these up out of builders' skips if they've got a few leftovers, or you know, always ask first, but often you can pick them up for free. So that's, if I'm doing a little bit of silver soldering in the workshop, this is fine. It just keeps all the flames away from anything flammable. Anyway, that's what I use. So we'll get fluxed up, and then we'll get a tiny bit of silver solder and see what we can do. For silver soldering, I'm just using a chef's style torch. You can actually get smaller ones of these, which I would recommend for this type of work because we only need the tiniest amount of heat. But if you're having problems with silver soldering, generally the answer is more heat, so I shall just have to be very quick. So hopefully this will go okay. Okay, I'll bring you back in a second. Okay, so hopefully that's done. We'll now let that cool down naturally. I don't know if you noticed when I was doing this one, I did put a small amount of solder on and it just went into a blob, and it wasn't really where I wanted it. So what I actually did was I moved the heat to this section here of the actual pipe. So that meant that the pipe got hotter than the spigot. So the effect that has is that it draws the solder into the joint, because we wanted it in the pipe, not at the brass fitting end. So hopefully that's done. I've probably put a little bit too much on this one, but we'll have a look. That's not too difficult to correct. We can just file off any excess. But actually the hole in this fitting is quite large, so we might get away with it anyway. So fingers crossed, that's all good. So yeah, we'll just let that cool down nicely and we'll come back to it. Okay, so I'm fairly sure that these are all okay. This is the silver solder I use, it's very fine, but if I just poke that in there, you can see that goes all the way through, so it's not blocked that end. Not block that end, and as far as I can tell, there's a nice ring of solder around that one, and there's a nice ring of solder around here as well. So that does need a drop in the acid now. So, but I think that will work. It's all looking quite good. And even that end fits on, so we're all good there. Really successful, and I managed to catch it on camera as well. So yeah, good stuff. Right. So this has had a soak in dilute acid for a while in the pickle bath, and it's cleaned up really nicely. I've had a good close look at the joints, and I think that's going to work a treat actually, and they all look quite nice and complete. So we'll get that fitted and see how it looks. So that's the pressure gauge fitted. I'm pretty pleased with how that's come out. Obviously the pipe work's a little bit bright at the moment, so it does stand out rather a lot, but it should slowly dull down to match the rest of the pipe work with time. Pretty pleased with the height of it. It's just below the cab roof, so it shouldn't catch on that. And I have angled it slightly upwards, so it should be easier to read when I'm firing. So the next thing to do is for it to be tested using the hydraulic test setup. Just test that the actual pressure gauge is working and that it's reading the right amount. So I'll have to do that at the club. So stay tuned for more William work. So thank you again for joining me. Like, share and subscribe, and do tell your friends, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye.